Hi, good afternoon. My name is Delia Gonzalez. I'm the judge of the Permanency Court in Dallas County, and I would like to welcome you to the Children's Commission webinar, How to Prepare and Support Children to Appear in Their CPS Case. The goal of this webinar is to give attorneys and judges tools to improve the experience of attending court for youth in care by hearing directly from those formerly in care and their experiences. The Q&A feature will be available and the panel will address questions at the end of the presentation if time allows. I'd like to go ahead and ask the panelists to go ahead and introduce themselves, starting with Betty.
Hi, I'm Betty Vajica, and I am a former foster care student for about 6 years now.
Thank you. And Leroy?
Hi, everyone. My name is Leroy Berrones Soto. I was formerly in foster care. I spent about 5 years in the system.
And Ryan?
Hi, my name is Ryan Harris. I'm a former foster kid, and I spent about 5 years in care and also aged out of care.
Thank you all for appearing today. Additionally, I'd like to go ahead and introduce Lori Duke. She is a professor with the UNT Legal Clinic. And while we are having her get settled in, let me go ahead and start asking the panelists some of our questions. Betty, I'd like to start with you. Could tell me why you thought it's important for youth to attend court?
I personally think it's important for youth to attend court because they have to know what's going on in their life. They get to see exactly what went down at court and what's the discussion being talked about instead of always having a secondhand person telling them what's happening.
And Leroy, what are your thoughts about youth attending court?
To me, it was very important because I have 7 siblings. So sometimes that was the only time I got to visit with them. And also I had the opportunity to see my attorney. That was the only place where I would see him at.
Ryan, what about you? What is your experience and why do you think attending court is so important?
I think attending court is really important because it would help talk about your future, give insights to how you're feeling rather than going through a third party such as your ad litem or your caseworker. And, really, depending on the age of the person, really give them a sense of peace, knowing that they are heard.
Thank you. Betty, do you think if you attended court, do you think that attending court helped you understand the role of the judge?
Yes. Before I went to court, I didn't really understand what a judge was. I used to watch TV, so I just assumed a judge was this mean person behind closed door that's always like, no, yes. But once I got into court, I got to see how she would listen to us, how she even asked us if we wanted to go behind closed door and talk to her personally. And I got to see how my lawyer advocated for us and she listened and she was ready to like, okay, what do y'all think is best for the child? So it really helped me even fall in love more with judges than ever.
Leroy, do you feel like when you attended court, did it help you understand the role of the judge?
I did understand the role of the judge, but I couldn't understand what he was saying. They talk in very legal terminology that a child wouldn't understand. So that was difficult for me. I also understood that my attorney would try to advocate for me, but maybe not at the priorities that I had. So it was mostly about what he thought was best for me. And that made me feel disconnected from the judge.
That's unfortunate, Leroy. Ryan, you had a little bit of a different experience. Would you please share that?
Yes. So I never really had any type of interaction besides my final court hearing with the judge or anything. Unfortunately, my ad litem did not let me know, or I don't even remember my ad litem. My caseworker was the one who introduced me. But attending court was so different because I was able to interact with somebody who listened to me, somebody who cared. And I said it. I said it just recently. I said, caseworkers. I said they're like the little heroes. They have the powers, certain powers that they can utilize to help the child. But when it comes to the judges, talking with the judges, they're the ones with superpowers, and they're the ones who can make big things happen. And so the child I was talking to, I said, so for you to speak with them is you let them know everything, because they can help you, and they want to help you, and they want to learn.
Thank you, Ryan. I'd like to go ahead and transition to Lori Duke and for her to provide her introduction as well.
Yes, apologies, Judge. I was in trial. I'm Lori Duke. I'm at the Children's Rights Clinic at UT Law School, and I teach law students how to represent children in the CPS system. I want to talk a little bit as an attorney for children. I would like to know what y'all's relationship was like with your attorney. Ryan, you talked about how, the judge had a superpower, and in order to get to the judge, often people use their attorneys for help with that. Did you have any memory of meeting your attorney, Ryan?
As I said before, no, I don't have any memory of my attorney. Unfortunately, I would have liked to. Probably going to pull some documents from records one of these days, but I have no memory.
And what about you, Leroy?
For me, I had the same attorney when I came in and out of the system. I really didn't have a connection with him, as I only saw him in court. The only time I saw him in person, like out of the court, was when I threatened to leave the foster home to go visit one of my friends from high school at the hospital. He was in a coma. So to me, that was very important. And that was the only time I saw him in person.
And Betty, you tell us about your relationship with your attorney.
My relationship with my attorney was pretty good. I got to see her before court hearings. And now that I'm in college, whenever I do go home, she'll try her best to make like a day where we'll just go out and I'll catch her up with my life. I really love her.
What is her name?
Her name is Lida Alekner.
Thank you.
That's really amazing, Betty, that you have such a great experience with that. Lori, can I ask you, generally speaking, where would you suggest that attorneys meet with their clients prior to the hearing to prepare them for the hearings?
Yes. Our panelists sometimes say that, they are met by their attorneys at court, and that's probably the least desired place. We teach our students that the ideal is to go out to where the kids are living, right? To see where they're living, to see their interactions with their placement, with the other kids. And that way they can, one, visualize it, get a lot more information than if they just met them at court. And for the clients, it helps them prepare. You should be going several days, maybe a week or two before a hearing, so they can expect things. And you also need to have a comfortable place where the clients can share freely, and you can talk about what's going on in the case. And also, one other idea I've had is sometimes if the foster home is perhaps a little stressful, maybe ask your client, where would you like to meet? Where is a place that we can feel safe and comfortable and talk privately, so we can have that attorney-client privilege and you can speak freely? Let me ask y'all, Betty, where would you and your attorney meet?
A lot of times she'll come to the foster home, talks to the mom, and gets a little insight, and then she'll usually take us out to eat at a public place like a restaurant or somewhere that I really love to go to.
And Leroy, you said your attorney came out to your foster home. What did that mean to you that he came out to your home?
To me, it felt like he actually cared, that he wanted to listen to me, and that he finally had time to learn about me and see what my needs really were. In court, I felt that everything was rushed and I couldn't really talk to him clearly.
So, Ryan, did you know your attorney was coming that one time?
Again, I never met my attorney, so
I'm sorry, Ryan. I
do
meant to
apologize.
ask. I meant to ask Leroy. Apologies, Leroy. You did know your attorney was coming that time, correct?
Correct. He came because I'm the one that contacted him too, that I had problems, and that's how he showed up.
And Betty, did you know your attorney was coming, or would she just show up?
A lot of times she will usually let my foster mom know, or she will like text me like, "Hey, I'm on my way to come and see you. I told your mom," and I'm like, "Okay."
And did you like knowing that she was coming?
Yes, because there was one time where we didn't know that she was coming, and it was like a conflict situation because of that. I love whenever she'll tell us that she's coming.
Let's talk about setting expectations. Lori, what do you tell the youth about how hearings work?
So I talked to them about, what to expect, whether it's an in-person hearing or a virtual hearing. If it's in person, what the courtroom looks like, what to expect going through security and how to get there, and how there's probably going to be more people in the courtroom that are hearing what is going on. I talked to them about what to wear, right? Like maybe you don't need to wear a tuxedo to court, but you need to recognize that this is a serious proceeding, and we show respect to the court. I also talked about how many people are going to be there. I do mention that their parents are expected to be there, and usually parents have attorneys. Caseworker, CASA, the CPS caseworker has an attorney, and the judge. The judge is going to be sitting there, and that there's court staff there. So I also talked to them about whether it's going to be a formal or an informal proceeding, and what is going to happen. If it's virtually, I talk about Zoom and how the logistics of how that is going to work. The one thing I am cognizant of and talk to my clients about is whether or not the parents are going to be there, and whether or not my clients want to be around their parents, and safety plan around that if needed. And I also try to give an idea of how long I think the hearing will take, and or potential waiting times, and what issues that might get brought up.
That's a lot of information. And I would think that would really help the youth not feel, or it would help reduce maybe any anxiety or fears or concerns they have, and maybe not surprise them so much. Betty, was there anything or something that surprised you about court, or something that you didn't know about court that you wish you did?
No, ma'am. A lot of times my attorney did an excellent job on explaining to me what will happen before court, how is it gonna work once we're there during court, what will happen after court. And she told us about the waiting time. So whenever we got there, I didn't feel stressed, like, oh, why are we just sitting here? What's going on? It was like I was prepared and I knew what was gonna happen before we got there.
What about you, Leroy? Was there something that surprised you when you went to court, or something you wish that you had known was going to happen?
Yeah, to me it was almost always overwhelming, because our court, we had like a temporary courtroom, so they would move us to different buildings every single time, and there would always be like random people, attorneys, or I didn't know who they were, but they were like intimidating. So it kind of felt like when you go to court, you usually go because you're usually in trouble, right? So that's how I felt. I also wish I knew how to speak to the judge in private. The judge at the time, he was very strict, so that was a little different. But I wish I had the ability to speak to them about things I couldn't tell them in front of my siblings or CPS.
What about your experience, Ryan?
Honestly, my experience was insane, because walking into the courtroom and everything as a 15, 16-year-old kid, you have this image in your head, and it was like walking into like a monumental center. And I mean, I live in a small county, so it's not that big, but as a child, you see this, and it was like one of those movies. You're walking into this and you don't know what's ahead, what's in front of you. And so, but honestly, I wish I was a little bit more prepared, because I wanted, when the judge brought me into his chambers to speak with me, I was very scared. I didn't know what to expect. I was I didn't know how long we had or anything like that. So I was jumbling my words at first, but and I'm sure we'll get into it later, but it was overwhelming at first. But what I do remember as well is that they had a toy room, and I was a big kid back then. So playing with all the toys and everything was just fun.
So it sounds like maybe Ryan's experience, it would have helped if he had some more preparation. Lori, how do you prepare youth for what will be decided at hearings and what might happen with those decisions that are made at the hearings?
Well, first of all, remembering that talking to my clients before the hearing, and not immediately before the hearing, but several days or weeks ahead. I tailor it to what the hearing is about. Are we talking about changing placement? Are we talking about going home? Are we talking about services that my client needs or that the parents may need? We talk about what the issues are, and then I try to elicit from my clients what it is they want and what they think about these things. Sometimes they don't have an opinion, but most of the time, most of my clients do. And then we do, some reality testing, right? Is this likely to occur? Is it not likely to occur? Are there backup options that we have? Like my client may want to go live with somebody, and I know that the home study failed and there's criminal activity going on in that home, and it's unlikely. So then we would talk about, are there other people that they may want to live with, and what kinds of things can we ask for? Or maybe the home study failed, but it's a bad denial, and it's something I feel like we can argue. So I ask clarifying questions. What does my client want? Why do they want it? What's important to them? And try to think of ideas on how to address and get what it is they want. Also, the benefit of meeting ahead of time with kids is that they don't feel this rush to decide something. If you meet with them at court right before a hearing, they're feeling a lot of pressure and anxiety. And you're asking them, hey, you have option A or you have option B. Which one do you want? I need to know. Whereas if you meet ahead of time, you can talk about it, think about it. They might be able to elicit input from other people that would help inform their decision. So I think that's really important. I'm interested, Betty, did your lawyer explain what options you had?
Yes, ma'am. She started off always telling us, she asked us what we wanted, like you said, and after we tell her what we want, she'll be like, okay, this is the two ways that this could go. The judge can be totally okay with it and say, this is what's gonna happen, agree to what we plan, or this and this could happen. And she always gives us like the true statement of option A and option B. And she always tells us at the end, never be scared. It's okay, it's all gonna work out. And I didn't know what to expect. And English isn't my first language. So a lot of times when she explained that, I have to like keep asking the same question over and over just to get a clearer understanding. And when we went to court, after all that happened, she even explained to us like at the end, okay, now that we finished talking to the judge, this could happen. I think it went well. This might happen, but don't expect anything. But this and this could happen like this. And I'm like, okay.
Betty, I think it's really important you hit on something. If you didn't understand, I mean, your English is excellent, but if you didn't understand, you ask questions and you ask for clarification. And I think that's really important. Leroy, did you feel like your lawyer explained options to you?
To me, it felt like he was just saying like, oh, he's ready to go home, but there was no communication with, I guess, the other attorneys. So when court ended, I was really disappointed because I didn't end up going home. I was still in care. So I just wish he would have told me like, this is what you were to expect. And I think I would have been more receptive of that than rather than just leave court disappointed all the time.
And Ryan, what about you? Did your lawyer explain what options you had?
As I've said before, I didn't meet my lawyer, but I wish that they had explained it to me because I didn't know I was going to be presented with a choice at that final hearing. I didn't know that I was going to be given, go back with my family, which I had so much animosity with, or go with a foster family. And children at that time, they're always told that going with foster families is very scary, is very bad. But I was told right before the hearing that, a single foster dad wanted to take care of me and has read about me and wanted to possibly adopt me. And, I think if I had chosen the foster family, it would have changed my life because, I wish I had somebody to call nowadays and say, look, I graduated college. Look, against everything, I did it. I passed everybody's expectations. But I get so jealous when other people say that. They say, I called my mom. Oh, me and my mom, or me and my dad did this. And I'm just like, that's cool. I talked to my cat and told them how my day was. So it would have been a very different thing if my attorney had given me those options beforehand.
Leroy, did you feel like your lawyer was really trying to understand what you wanted?
Laurie, I was reflecting a lot last night, and something came to mind. I started to remember that one time my attorney did write a letter because I asked him that I wanted to move back to my former school, and he just wrote that letter. He never followed through with it. So to me, that reminded me of how he really didn't advocate it for me, and I think he just did it at that time because he just wanted to do it to make me happy. But there was no follow through with my wishes, and to me that was disappointing.
Betty, when we were prepping yesterday, I think you asked a question to me about understanding what youth want and if a lawyer is supposed to follow what they want or follow what they think is best. Do you remember that conversation?
Yes, I was asking because I had a scenario where I had two foster siblings and they wanted to stay with us in the house and they made a lot of progress. They were growing. We're all like a big family. And all of a sudden, their lawyer wanted to like take them away from us. And like, I think she was having a petty case about something. I don't know. But she wanted to get them out of the foster home and move them somewhere else. And the kids didn't want that. Nobody wanted that, but the lawyer wanted that. So I feel like that caused a lot of disputation around the house. And I was wondering when do you put a limit to an attorney? When does an attorney supposed to be like ignore what the client want and she just wants to do what she thinks is best? When is it time to do that and when is it time not to do that?
I think that's an excellent question, Betty. So we are guided, and the statute requires us to follow what our clients want, right? Unless it's seriously injurious. And in my mind, that's a really big deal. And it doesn't happen. I don't substitute my judgment for clients that I have that can form the attorney client relationship and direct that relationship. And what you're describing is, kids who wanted to stay put and a lawyer who wanted them moved. And it almost sounds like it was more petty with the lawyer. In that case, I don't think that's proper. You're not following your client's direction. In fact, you're undermining it. And so I would argue that that lawyer needed to get off the case if they were unable to follow the client's direction. And the client could fire the lawyer for not expressing what it is they want. So I think it is really concerning. Lawyers should be following what their clients want. Yes, Betty.
How do you fire a lawyer?
That's a good question. And I do think there's going to be a webinar on that later. But basically, you can ask the judge for a new lawyer is the easiest answer. Tell the adults in your case that you're upset. I would first say go to your lawyer and tell them what's going on. Lawyers are used to people pushing back. That's perfectly appropriate and okay. Why are you doing this? I don't like this. I need you to advocate for what I want. And if you can't, I would like a new lawyer. And lawyers all the time get off cases. That's very normal. So first have the conversation with your lawyer and try and resolve it. And if you can't, go to the judge. Okay?
Lori, how do you manage your clients' expectations about what might happen in court? Do you talk to them about what they want, or how do you handle that?
Well, first of all, I do not want my clients to be surprised by what they hear, right? Like, I want them to be as prepared as possible because they don't need to have bad news delivered on a silver platter right in the middle of a hearing that they're already anxious about. So I talk to them about positive drug tests or perhaps recent behavior that isn't helpful to the case. And I also talk about what I anticipate the judge doing with a healthy dose of I'm often wrong. But I try to give them a preview of how the hearing will go, what they are going to hear, and how to anticipate those rulings. Let me ask the panelist, did your attorney do anything that helped you know what might happen at court or what was going to be decided? Betty?
Yes, whenever she will explain to us the option A and option B, a lot of times she'll also explain to us the reality of our scenario. She'll always let us know, this is where you guys are, this is what happened in your case, but there's no reason why the judge should be against what we're wanting her or him to decide on. So this and this will happen, your wishes will most likely happen. But if any case scenario, any worst case scenario, she will also let us know like the small possibility of it not happening.
So Leroy, how did you feel? Do you feel like your attorney helped you know what was going to happen?
No, for me, it was almost always disappointing. I always wanted to go home to be with my siblings, despite the abuse. We had like a bond, and after we went into foster care, like that broke that bond. So like I used to be like the parental figure for them. So that was very difficult for me. But later on, as I grew older, I did get more communication with my caseworker. And when Judge Carlos Villalon took over the court, my life literally transformed. So I'm very grateful for Judge Villalon.
And Ryan, what about you? Did your attorney help at all? And do you wish he would have helped?
Yeah. So I wish he would have helped because all throughout my life, I had been a very active kid. And when I say active, I don't mean like active in sports. I mean, my mind was very active. And so it would cause me to become more depressed. And so whenever I was diagnosed with depression. And if I had the ability to speak to my lawyer, I could tell them it's not because I'm depressed, I just can't focus. It wasn't until this year, which I'm 32 now, that I was officially diagnosed with ADHD. And once again, I mean, my life would have changed had I been able to advocate to my lawyer or to somebody that would have listened to me. And, again, life could have changed in so many different ways, but I mean, I'm here now, so, and being able to talk about this.
Well, and Ryan, I really appreciate your honesty and strength that you have, and it's clear that you are very persistent and taking care of yourself, and I think that's amazing. Lori, what can attorneys do to independently help prepare the youth for court?
So I think you need to investigate independently, right? Like we get a CPS court report, we get a CASA report. We should be on the case and knowing what's going on with all the issues. And we should also know what everybody wants, right? If CASA is opposed to something my teenage client wants, then it's probably going to get harder to get that ordered. Than if they were in agreement, right? I want to know what the parents think about a particular idea. I want to basically see if there are any allies for what my client wants. And then that also helps me talk to my client about what the options are. This is your option A is unlikely, but what do you think about option B? So getting all this information and being able to present it to our clients is very helpful.
Well, and so I'd like to ask the panelists, and Betty, I'll start with you. In preparation for the hearing, did your attorney talk to you about the different ways to participate in your hearings, whether you could be present in person, If you were able to meet with the judge, were you informed of those options?
Yes, ma'am. She let me know that I could either join it by Zoom, or I don't even have to go in, and she just talk on my behalf. Or whenever I am there at court, I could talk to the judge personally myself, or I could just let her do all the talking. But I have to let her know everything that I want.
What about you, Leroy? What was your experience?
I knew I could meet with the judge, but honestly, I was scared of that judge. There was a judge many years ago. Thankfully, he retired. I was intimidated by him. He wouldn't make me feel comfortable. So the 4 days I stayed from him, the better it was for me. But like I mentioned earlier, as soon as Judge Villalon came and he changed the environment of the court to more family friendly, I became more outspoken. I even got myself in a little trouble sometimes for advocating for myself. But it was the environment of the court that made me feel like a human. And so I appreciate that from his court.
And Ryan, I know that you don't recall your attorney or don't remember meeting with your attorney, but did anybody, whether it was CPS or CASA, did anyone talk to you about the different ways that you could actually participate in your hearing and be involved?
Unfortunately, no. However, I mean, I would have loved to have that ability to go to court and explain why that I felt certain ways, because as back in 2005, I was a gay child. I was a child who didn't understand the world, and it was very shunned back then to be gay. So to be able to express myself in more ways than one to the judge, to let people hear me and to see if they sided with me or something like that would have been amazing. I had a kid about a year ago that I told her, I said, look, I said, write a letter to the judge. I said, write this letter and I will make sure to get it to them. And that letter had such an impact. And so I just imagined, man, I could have done this. But with all this information now, we're passing on that information to y'all and to other people. And so it's good and it's bad at the same time.
Well, definitely knowing about ways to communicate to the court and to your judge about what you need. So Betty, were you able to share information that you wanted with your judge, or did your attorney do it for you?
Yes, ma'am. I got the option to talk to her, but the attorney did an excellent job on speaking on our behalf that I felt like I didn't even have to go tell her. I just smiled at her like, oh, I'm meeting a judge in person. But yeah.
Thanks, Betty. What about you, Leroy? How did you end up sharing what you wanted the judge to know?
To me, it was mainly through my caseworker and my caseworker supervisor at the time. I had a connection with them, and like, for example, I felt that I was giving too much medication for depression. And so they told the court that to review them, and they did. And so I feel like they did a good job in advocating for what I thought was best for me, even though I didn't get the response I wanted.
And Ryan, were you able to meet with your judge in private?
Yes. So Judge Carl Lewis, rest his soul. I met with him, but of course, at that time, I saw enemies everywhere during that time. And so I didn't know how much I could say or what I could say. Again, being a gay child, it was very scary. But when the judge brought me into his chambers and, he made me feel like I was talking to a friend, talking to somebody who wanted to hear about me, wanted to learn that my mother gave me up because I was gay, wanted to hear every single detail, and really sat there and listened and didn't judge me. And it was so different. It was so different. And right there was when I started to build a little bit more trust with everybody. And started to stand up for myself because he gave me that ability.
Ryan, I think you touched on something really important about how a judge can make the space really safe for kids to talk. Judge Gonzalez, what do you try to do when you meet with kids?
Well, I think that first and foremost is making and having a child-friendly meeting space. So if you walked into my courtroom today, you would see books, you would see toys, you would see Halloween costumes. We have colorful bookshelves. We make it as child friendly as possible so that it's not scary or intimidating to the kids. Some things that I do is after the hearings, I get off the bench and I go talk to the kids, or before the hearing, I'll go and talk to the kids. We have a playroom that the kids get to play in, and sometimes I play the games with them while we're talking. Sometimes the kids are, drawing pictures of whatever they want while we're talking. And as a general rule, I tend to wear my robe during court because I want the adults to know that it is a court setting and this is serious. And we need to remember to maintain that proper decorum and take it seriously because the kids deserve that. So Leroy, do you think there was anything your judge did to make you feel uncomfortable before you started seeing Judge Villalon?
Oh, yes. That judge, I will never forget him. He really traumatized me. And he will always scream at everybody. He will scream at caseworkers, at attorneys. But what will bother me the most was when he would insult my parents. I felt that when he screamed at them, I felt he never understood like the family dynamics of certain people. I was raised in poverty. My parents weren't rich. We didn't have almost anything. And I felt he was forcing them to do these services without considering the needs that my family had. And so that made me feel very upset.
And so I guess transitioning from that judge, and then you mentioned that you went and the Judge Villalon became your judge. What was your experience after that? Did you feel comfortable and safe talking to him?
Oh yeah, Judge Villalon, I think he sees things beyond the bench. I think that's why I really like him. I feel like I can talk to him about literally anything and he will listen to me, even if it's things that he can't order or tell the CPS to do. I felt he was a good listener, and that really made me feel like my voice was being heard.
What about you, Betty? Was there anything that your judge did that made you feel safe and comfortable being there?
Yes. As soon as we stepped in, she was just smiling at me. And I was just, oh, hi. Okay. And then that made me a little safe. And it made me know, it made me realize that she's a nice person. She's not just a mean person stuck up, ready to say no to whatever we request for.
Brian, what was your experience?
As I said, Judge Carl Lewis was just amazing, very empowering, made me feel like I could do anything in the world. So it was really good, really, really good.
Lori, how do you think attorneys can help kids feel safe when they come to court?
Obviously preparation, like we've gone over. I think telling them what you know about the judge, right? If you've been in front of this judge for a long time and been back in chambers with them, describe. We're going to go back. It's going to be very comfortable. She usually takes off her robe, or she doesn't, depending on the situation, but you can ask anything. It's a safe space. I also usually suggest to my clients that they make a list of things they want to talk about, because sometimes they get really nervous, and that's helpful to them to have right there. And then let's say they didn't make that list and they go back and they're really nervous. I will remind them, do you remember we talked about going to live with your grandma? Do you want to talk to the judge about that? Because I know that they do. So I'm the backup to the backup plan. And then, we're lawyers. It is a conversation between the client and the judge. And it's not an opportunity for an ex parte communication with the judge. It is supposed to be about the kids telling the judge what it is they need. And then the other thing is bringing a support person or a mentor, somebody to court, I think can also be helpful. But, just reassuring them. In my mind, sometimes people say, well, kids shouldn't be at court or talk to judges. It's too stressful. My experience has been the opposite. Once my clients meet the judge and feel like, in our jurisdiction, it's mostly been that she is invested in their case, and they're not just a case, they're kids and they have dreams and hopes and everything else. It's the beginning of, it can be a really supportive relationship and kids feel heard. So I think that's very important. What do you think, Judge, that your colleagues, your judges across the state can do to exhibit trustworthiness to kids?
Well, so Lori, this is what I do. I'm very emphatic about talking to all of the youth, regardless of whatever age that they are at. And so obviously the conversation changes depending on their age. But you know, with the teenagers, you know, I talk to them. I don't try to talk down to them. I don't use what we call the CPS jargon with them. I use very plain language that they understand in terms of what they're looking for. A lot of times I ask them about their school. I ask them what they did over the summer or the holiday break. I ask them what their favorite subjects are. I ask them what their favorite activities are. I spend a lot of time just trying to get to know them and just having that open-ended dialogue where I let them talk to me. And then a lot of times what I personally do is I make a lot of docket entries about the youth and what they say about their likes and dislikes. That way, the next time I see them, I can say, oh, hey, are you still playing soccer? Or how did that spelling test go? And that way it continues to build that trustworthiness that they have with their judge or with me. And I'm very mindful about praising our youth. I think all youth are capable of great things. I sometimes think our foster youth get told a lot of negative things as opposed to positive things. And so I'm very mindful to praise all of their accomplishments, no matter whether they appear big or little, they are still accomplishments and it's still progress for them. And so I'm very mindful to do that. Leroy, do you think that your judge understood you and cared about you?
Just be alone, yes. I remember when I turned 18, I was part of the extended foster care, and I voluntarily decided to exit the program because, you know, I got upset. The thing is that they explained to me the consequences of me doing that. And so I appreciated that they did that. And of course, I regretted it later on in life because I wasn't ready to pay all these bills on my own. But another thing is that building that lifetime connection with Judge Be Alone in a professional way, like because some of us don't have parents, and I feel that thanks to him, I was able to complete a lot of my education. I just finished my second master's like 2 days ago, and Judge Be Alone actually attended my graduation. I feel that he's part of my family, even though, you know, like they say in the show, The Fosters, DNA doesn't make a family, love does. And I feel like he has a passion for the job that he does. And so when I invited him, it made me feel like I was with family and not alone.
Congratulations on that. That's a major accomplishment, Leroy. Congratulations. Betty, what about you? Do you feel like your judge understood you and cared about you?
Yes, ma'am. And she also asked me questions like what's going on in my regular lifestyle. And I told her about my sport and how I was planning on running in college back in the day. And she was just all for it. She's just like, oh, let me know how your season goes. Da, 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 da. And then they feel comfortable.
That's great, Betty. Ryan, what about you? Did you feel like your judge understood you and cared about you and your needs?
Yes, he made me feel like it was okay to be gay. It was okay to be myself, and it was okay not to want to even try to return back to my parents, you know. He gave me those options. He said, look, he said, you're old enough to decide, and you're also, I've seen what you've gone through. And he gave me he articulated back to me that, you know, my reasons, and was perfect. And the one thing that's always stuck with me, and I realize it comes out of a book, but it doesn't matter because it came out of his mouth. He said, your feelings are valid. And I use that sentence all the time when I talk to people who are in pain, who need help. I say, your feelings are valid. And that one sentence, it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter if you know it came out of a book. It changes everything. You say, wait, I'm allowed to have these feelings. I'm allowed to do this. So that it was just amazing.
Um, Judge Gonzalez, it sounds like Ryan's judge was really good about talking to kids. How do you address cultural differences with youth?
Well, so Lori, I think, first and foremost is being self-aware and culturally aware. I'd like to, this is a bench card that I got from the Children's Commission that's actually online. And this is something that I have actually put on my bench and I look at every day. And it's under the disproportionality tab. And it's reflections to protect against implicit bias. And so here are things that I ask myself. What assumptions have I made about people based on their race, ethnicity, culture, sexual orientation, gender, profession, or background? How might my assumptions influence my decision-making? And have I challenged any assumptions I might have made based on race, ethnicity, culture, sexual orientation, gender, profession, or background? And have my assumptions that I have created inequitable outcomes in my court? And have I maintained accountability for myself and in my courtroom practices and with my staff and checking and removing bias? And so for me, making sure that I stay focused on that is important to help our youth with differences that exist. So Ryan, let me start with you. Do you feel like there was anything that your judge did that made you feel like they didn't understand you or where you came from?
No, like I said, I was very jaded at that time. I saw enemies everywhere. And even the first time I met the judge, I saw an enemy. I was ready to just close up and not let him in. But he quickly changed that.
And Leroy, what was your experience about that?
Like I said, my first judge that I had for the longest time, he wasn't very approachable or things like that. So he didn't have like an environment that would be very culturally sensitive to others. But I did appreciate that the attorneys took it upon themselves to translate what happened in the court to my parents. I know that if they were to be alive when I had Judge Villalon, I know Judge Villalon's court would have been more cultural competent because of the work that I've seen him done. And so I appreciated that from his court.
Betty, do you have any experience about your judge understanding you and where you came from?
Yes, ma'am. So like I said previously, that English isn't my first language. I'm originally from Africa. So whenever we were there and we walked inside that court, she automatically just she didn't even consider oh yeah, there's a culture difference. She just assumed that we were like regular, normal kids. And I love the way that she treated us like that because it didn't make me feel like, oh, here's another dumb foreigner in the country. And a lot of the things, the reason why we went in court wasn't even our fault. So it was I don't know. She did a very great job on listening to us and understanding where we were coming from.
Thank you, Betty. Lori, what do you think attorneys can do to create trust with their client?
I think first your cultural competency and what you said on the bench bar is, checking your assumptions. What do and don't you know about your clients and their background, and learning from them and getting explanations are huge. So preparing them, I think, is one of the biggest things, right? My clients need to come to court and feel comfortable doing it. And if they don't want to, that's okay too. But we need to let them know about court, what is going to be decided, get their opinions, advocate for what they want, and then return back to our clients to say, hey, here's what happened at court today. I also think reminding kids what the limits of what a judge can do, right? There are some things judges can't do. And we can ask for things, but if the judge doesn't have the authority to grant that, then it's not going to happen, right? We can't invalidate federal law under a particular statute. We have to follow the law. So I think making sure they understand what a judge can and cannot order, And then going over the factual bases for what my clients want. Usually what I do is I say, so if I understand you correctly, here's what you want me to ask the judge. Here's what I would say. Is it okay if I say these things? And is there anything I'm forgetting or you'd like me to say differently? I think is very important.
Judge and Lori, I know that y'all were speaking about all the different things that you do with the children, but I want to know how do you handle a child that was not prepared for going to court, or withdrawn, or nervous, or as I said about me, very locked up tight? How do you handle that? Judge, go ahead to the question first to you.
Sure. So I think the first thing I have to remember is that the youth that I see have been traumatized. There's a lot that's happened with them, and I can't expect them to be an open book the first time I meet them. I also know that I need to tell them that I am here for them and want to help them and want to listen to them. And I also think with kids that are withdrawn and nervous, I just kind of look at the situation and see what's going on. And if I need to get off the bench and maybe talk to them in chambers or talk to them in the playroom, I'll do that. If my prosecutor is really good about saying, Judge, I think we need to maybe just have this as a conference to start out with, just kind of paying attention to those clues that are going on so that we can help the youth not be nervous or withdrawn.
And Lori, so let's switch the question to you, but let's change it up just a little bit. Meeting your clients, how do you handle that if they're scared of you or withdrawn from you?
So sometimes I have clients who don't want to talk to me for various reasons, right? And what I try to make a game out of it. I will say, my job is to tell the judge what you want, and kind of obviously depending on their age, do you know what a judge is? Do you do that? And then I'll say, can you give me 3 minutes? And I'll set my timer on my watch, on my phone, so they can see it's only 3 minutes. And then if we're still in the middle of a conversation, say, could we talk another 3 minutes so I could get this right? And I try to build up trust that way, right? Sometimes kids don't want to talk to you, and sometimes you need to come back the next day or in a week and follow up on that conversation. But giving them authority and choices. If you don't talk to me today, could we talk next week? If you don't want to talk here at the foster home, could I come to your school? If you don't want to talk at your school, could we take a walk around the block? So I try to give them as much authority, power, control over our interactions as possible so that they feel heard. And then the other thing I'd like to add on with Judge Gonzalez, I think sometimes the most powerful thing is making the arguments in the courtroom in front of your clients, right? You may have counseled them that it is unlikely they will get option A. But even you making the argument for option A, even if you lose, they heard that you made that argument, and that builds trust with your client and helps the relationship go further in the future.
That's a great point, Lori. Let me ask you, so, we've had the hearing, the youth have been prepared for their hearing, they've been prepared for what the possibilities are that can happen. And so hearing has happened, decisions have been made. What can attorneys do to support the youth after the hearing has been concluded?
So what I usually do is check in with them. Hey, what did you get out of that court hearing? We use a lot of language that is kind of legalese and can be confusing. What did you hear? And then I check what they've heard and then ask follow-up questions. Like, what did you get? Like, did the judge allow you to opt out of visits? Or are we going to start expanding visits? And hear what they're doing and then qualify or affirm what they've said. Let's say a hearing doesn't go the way my client wants. What I also do is I remind them, if it's a regularly scheduled hearing, say, hey, you remember how the judge gave us the next hearing date? We don't have to wait that long. Like I can file a motion and I can set a hearing on X issue. But before I do that, I'm going to need you to do certain things, right? So I try to talk to them about the orders that were made. If they're unhappy, figure out a way to possibly get the issue in front of the judge and enlist their cooperation, support, help in giving me the facts I will need in the future to argue for what they want. And generally that works out fairly well. Did y'all, our panelists, did they talk to y'all after hearings, and or do you have any suggestions for what attorneys can do after hearings? Leroy?
Yes, so I think hearings are very emotional in general for us as children. I remember going to court very happy that I was going to visit my parents, my siblings, but then I would get out very disappointed every single time. Another thing is that I felt that meeting with my attorney would have been helpful afterwards, because there were instances where my parents would coach us to lie to everybody about the abuse and things like that, just so we can go home. But I was always very outspoken. I would always because I always wanted to do what was best long-term for my siblings and I. And they actually hated me for a long time for doing that. And so I think that if the attorney would have met with me like in a private place outside of the court, that would have put me in a better place with my siblings instead of more problems and stress on me.
Thank you, Leroy. I appreciate that very open and candid answer. We have a few minutes to just answer some questions that came in the Q&A. And this first question is for all of our panelists. You have made such an impression on all of our audience that they would like to know what you're doing now today and how your future looks for you. So let me start with Betty. What are you doing now?
Right now, I'm a student athlete at West Texas A&M University. I'm working towards my mechanical engineering degree. It's going good, I guess. I don't know. And I plan on going to master's school in UT Austin to go get my biomedical degree.
Amazing. Leroy, how about you?
Yes, I just finished my second master's. I'm still involved with child welfare. I found a passion to helping others. So I currently work as a project coordinator for the Child and Family Services Reviews. I am 27 years old, and I'm embarrassed to say that this is my first full-time job. But as everyone knows, a lot of us have a lot of obstacles. So I'm excited that thanks to the support system that I had, I'm able to have my own job and build up my life little by little.
Amazing. What about you, Ryan?
I was recently involved actually with DFPS. I was a CPS worker. However, I have decided to move on and look for new opportunities within the public speaking field as I'm doing now, and to see if I can assist the children in a better capacity than what I was doing as a CPS worker. But I don't have any ill will towards CPS workers, because I was one of them and I helped as many children as I could, and it was a great experience. So I'm really looking forward to what comes next.
I see major futures for all of you. You all have done such a wonderful job, despite all of the different setbacks as a child that you had. Lori, let me ask you this question. What are your thoughts about a judge speaking privately with the child without the child's attorney being present?
If my clients want that, I don't have a problem with it. I do tell my clients I would prefer to be there so I know what's discussed. And sometimes judges will say to me, Ms. Duke, I would like you to, bring this back and do X. So I do think it is helpful for the attorney. I'd like him to be in chambers with that discussion. But if I have a client that's telling me they don't want me to be there, then I will respect that. But in general, my judges seem to prefer attorneys to be present.
Thank you. And I think for myself, one thing that I always do is ask the youth what they're looking, if they want their attorney present. Sometimes the attorneys will tell me that they want to be present. And I don't ever deny a request. So there was a second question of what are the consequences if a child's attorney specifically requests to be present and the judge denies that request. I don't ever deny the request for the youth to come to court. I tend to have a lot of conferences with the youth, and the virtual platforms have made that definitely much more accessible for the youth.
Judge, real
Yes,
quick,
sir. Sure.
what you just said, you said that you don't ever deny a request. How about if the child is at school or if they have events that's going on? Would you think it'd be okay for a child to attend court during that time, even though they're supposed to be at school?
So I think it's important for the child to participate in their hearing. I do want them to come to hearings, even if they are in school. Now, if there is a major event going on, like STAR testing, a major test that's happening, we will reschedule the hearing to accommodate that youth. Because again, our focal point is the youth. So unfortunately, we are out of time, and this does conclude our presentation, but I and everyone at the Children's Commission, and I know Lori too, we want to thank our panelists for sharing their experience, and we hope everyone can take at least one idea from today about how they can make going to court a better experience for our youth in care. We wanted to also let everyone know about a new resource that has become available designed for you to explain the attorney-client relationship. It is a two-part series. Your Lawyer Works for You. The videos are a collaboration between the Children's Commission and the Texas Network of Youth Services, also known as TNOYS, the Young Adult Leadership Council, and features young adults formerly in foster care and discussing their experience with their attorneys, articulating basics about the attorney-client relationship, and helping youth understand how to resolve problems with their attorneys. The videos are available on the Children's Commission website and the TNOYS Youth YouTube channel. Thank you so much for joining us today.